you. Yeah, you. What you doing? Come here. We got something to tell you. We're doing a podcast. Hi, everybody. This is Geek To Me Radio. James Enstall, one half of the incredible duo that brings you this Justice League Revisited podcast. On the other side of the Zoom screen, broadcasting from a secret location, is Susan Eisenberg, the voice of Wonder Woman, and the other co-host of this fun gig. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Getting by. You know, everything could be worse. You could be stabbed.
Hey, kids. Welcome. Well, yeah, true. It's
a Monty Python line. I had to throw a Monty Python line in there.
Oh, wow. That was all right. So we just started and here you are already.
I'm diving
in. Okay. How long will it be before we should start taking, wagers? Like how long it'll take before you mention Buffy or Star Trek?
We'll see. The day is young.
Stay tuned. All right. So you want to tell the kids who's on today?
Yes. So in this one, we are covering the ties that bind, the Mr. Miracle episode, as it's sometimes referred to. So who better to have on than the writer of the episode, DeMatteis, welcoming him back.
Yeah, that's, he's such a delight. I can't wait to sit with him and talk with him about this episode. This episode, I was just like, what? Yeah, I had no idea what was happening. I had to go look up character names and I was just like, I don't understand what's happening, but I loved it. And it was so fun to see these characters and to unravel the plot, because like I said, I was a little lost. So now I'm like ready to go and ask questions. Now I understand most of it.
Yeah, from a comic book lover's standpoint, this is such a rich episode because there's so much to enjoy. We're getting into the Jack Kirby aspect of this, which we haven't seen since earlier in the in Justice League when the League had to go rescue Darkseid from Brainiac.
That's right.
Way back, and I mentioned at the time, I can't remember if we had. Maybe it's probably Dan Reba we had on for that episode where I said, gosh, the Kirby-esque look of this. It looked like it was poured right out of a fourth world comic. So I'm sure that JM, being as knowledgeable as he is, will have some fun things to talk about with Mr. Jack Kirby.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. So we'll bring him on and we'll hear all about it. And all right, should we go?
Yeah. Yeah. Gary? Hey, what's up? Yeah, could you run? Where did you get a live raccoon?
Oh, God.
No, they're supposed to be out by the dumpster. You don't bring them in. Why you put it? It already bit you. Okay, well, first of all, put the raccoon outside. Second order of business, go get our guest from the green room. Don't touch him. And then third, please go to emergency and get that. You probably need a tetanus shot and maybe some rabies. Why would I kid about that? No, just get. Yep. Take him out. Oh my gosh.
I know. We're gonna have to. I don't know. I don't know what to do at this point.
So much better earlier.
So good. So good.
Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. We'll close the door again. We don't want him back in. He was cute. Yes. Thank you. Now go get J.M. DeMatteis, please. Thank you. My gosh.
I mean,
I'm an animal lover too, but I mean, you just know you don't bring trash pandas in the building.
It's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah, we won't mention. Just no. Thank you. Yep. You can have a seat right there. And is that okay? You're set. All right. Joining us once again, J.M. DeMatteis. So excited to have him on, and there's a couple more down the road that I know we're going to try to coax him back for. But for this one, we kind of had to have you on. Thanks very much for doing this.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
It's so fun to have the writers, right? It's just really fun.
I
love having all of our guests, but the writers give you insight that you just, how things came about, why this story. It's just a delight to have the writers.
I always have to stress, though, when you talk to guys like Stan, Stan was on staff. He was, totally. I'm a freelancer. I was sitting here in New York, getting notes over the phone and things through email. So it's a very different experience than the guys that were there shaping the show. I say this. Not in a derogatory way. I was a hired hand, in the best possible way. It was fun. I loved the gig and I had a great time. But I'm not those guys who were creating the show. They get most of the credit,
Except that we just had Stan on with Bob for the Cat and the Canary episode. And what was so lovely was just how much praise they kept throwing back at each other. It was like a tennis match with praise, because Stan would say, listen, I just gave you guys the outline and you did what you did. And Bob's like, well, no, but you have to understand that outline was pretty perfect.
Right,
and I just
right.
filled in, but they just kept going back and forth like this. And all right, you're both brilliant. Let's move on.
Well, because it was a great show, and it was a great experience writing for that show. So I think most of the people that worked on it just have nothing but good things to say. And from before, how much I love Stan.
Yes.
And I loved working with Dwayne. They were the main people that I worked with. They were my tunnels into the show. Mm-hmm. So, and they were both fantastic. But Stan and I went back to before Justice League. So we have a history.
Yeah. And with this one, speaking of history, this is episode 2 of season 2 of JLU, the 15th episode overall in the Justice League Unlimited run. First aired on February the 12th of 2005. Writer Jim Steranko, teleplay by J.M. DeMatteis, director Dan Reba. 21 years ago, this doesn't seem like that's possible.
Every time I hear you guys mention the dates of these things, It's like I just want to hang my head.
Join the club. It's really stunning.
That Bob Dylan line, and one of the songs on Blood on the Tracks, he says, "Time is a jet plane; it moves too fast." I think about that line probably once a week, because it really does, man.
And as we get older, that thought is gonna pop into our heads more and more.
Yep. That's the truth.
This was such
but the fact that we're still talking about these shows is really a testament to the talent behind it and behind them, actually. And we were talking about that last time too with Stan and Bob, how just how many layers there were to these scripts, and how much thought went into these characters and their development. And I had to really I had to look up some things for this episode.
Oh yeah,
because I started watching and I was completely lost. I didn't know the backstory of Granny and Darkseid and all of that. I just didn't know the history of it. And I said to James when we got on earlier, I'm like, okay, you have to just help me here. You have to give me some context. But it was.
Well, that's why if you're going to talk about this episode, before you talk about the show, you have to talk about Jack Kirby. Because this is all Jack Kirby.
Talk about that.
And I know that there are people that are animation fans that aren't necessarily comic book fans, so they maybe don't know. But Jack Kirby is one of the foundational creators, not just of Marvel Comics, but of comics going back to the 40s and the creation of Captain America. But in terms of Marvel, I don't think I'm wrong in saying he was the prime architect of Marvel Comics in many ways. Not to take anything away from Stan Lee, but Kirby, if I can only think of one person in the history of comics that I would call a genius, and that's Jack Kirby. And I just so people can understand, because I don't want to get into the Stan versus way I look at it. Mm-hmm. There's a big empty lot, right? Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are walking down the street. I came up with this metaphor a few years ago. And Stan's just walking. Wait a minute. And Jack stops and he's staring at this empty lot. And Stan is like, Jack, what are you doing? He said, just wait here a minute. If it was a comic book panel, Jack would run off the panel and then he'd run back in with boards and bricks and hammers and nails. And he runs into the lot and he builds the most amazing house you've ever seen. There was nothing there. And Jack builds this house. And then Stan goes, wow, that's really something. So Stan runs off and he comes back with paint and seeds for the lawn, and he paints the house and he gets the furniture, and then he gets up on the roof and starts ringing a bell, inviting everyone to come see the greatest house that ever was. And so Stan did a lot to really bring the attention and the energy, and he added a lot. But without Jack Kirby, you've got an empty lot. There's nothing there without Jack Kirby. He's a genius. And then he left Marvel and went to DC and created, a bunch of things, but the first thing he created was called The Fourth World, which were these 4 interlocking titles where his genius brain just exploded across the universe. And each issue had enough concepts and characters to fuel an entire line of comic books. And he did it every month in 4 books for a couple of years before they canceled them. They canceled them at the time and viewed them as a failure. And we look at them now as some of the greatest comics ever made, And that's the characters in the world that you see in this episode. And that's one of the reasons why I love this episode, not because of anything I did, because I got to play with the Kirby characters.
Wow, that's great. And so when were you like assigned this episode?
Yeah. Anything I
Okay.
did for the show. I mean, it's anytime I pitch something, they were like, "Nah, here, do this," which was fine. It was okay. I get a rich outline, and then I get to turn it into a teleplay, and they tell me I did a good job and give me another one. So it was a great gig.
Yeah, you did a good job when they tell you to do another one.
Yes, exactly. Because I told you the story with the first one I did where I thought I'd failed miserably, and it turned out I actually did better than I realized.
Right.
So it was a nice thing.
Stan was so quiet. He's making up for that now, because when we had Bob on and we had you on, I mean, it was just so lovely hearing him, talk about other people's writing and how it affected him and how much he was so pleased as the producer, not as just. He had nothing but praise. So you get this script, you get the outline, and then you go to work.
Yeah. And, I'd love to tell you some great tale of the struggles that I had writing it. But first of all, the outlines were always very, very complete. So you have a Steranko story somewhere, then it goes through the guys on staff who inevitably do some rewrites and fix this and that. So I get a very complete outline. So the foundation is there. Often the hardest part of what we do is you're staring at a blank page, banging your head against the wall, trying to work out the story. But the story is there. Sort of like when I used to work with Keith Giffen, comic book wise. Keith would write plots, and then I would do the dialogue, and then you get to play with the characters and add things and twist things and spin things. But the foundational work is there. So someone provides you a foundation, and you get to build a building on top of that foundation. But it's kind of like what I said about Jack Kirby.
Yes, I was just thinking
the
that.
guys, the guys on staff, they've given me a house. I get to get the buckets of paint and put in the furniture and plant the lawn and do all that. It was easy. It was joyful, and just about every script that I did for the show was like that. There's one script which I shall not name, which had nothing to do with them, but the rest of them I had a great time on all of them.
Well, so when you saw these, were you familiar with all this list of characters?
Oh yes, These are my favorite. The Kirby Fourth World comics. If I had to pick my favorite comic books of all time, that's them. If I had to throw out every other comic book I owned and keep some, I would keep those and throw out the rest. That's how much I love those comics.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So to work with these characters and play in this world was a joy. And then the icing on the cake, which, when you're writing, you don't know who's doing the voices, right? And then this show comes on, and you've got some of the wildest, greatest voice casting. Ed Asner as Granny Goodness.
Yep.
It's genius.
It is.
You got Ed Asner. You have Michael Dorn playing Calabac. People that are as old as me know Artie Johnson from Laugh-In, who's doing Vermin Wunderbar. I mean, and I just was looking it up, and I didn't realize also, and I forget the guy's name that played Mr. Fantastic in the early 2000s Fantastic Four movies. Ian Gruffold, is that his name?
Yes.
I don't know how his first name is pronounced. It's spelled oddly. But he was doing Mr. Miracle. So it's this amazing voice cast. But I mean, it's like a pop culture collision. You've got Lou Grant, you've got Worf from The Next Generation, and you've got the guy from Laugh-In. Where else are you going to find that? It's amazing to me.
It was brilliant. James and I were talking about that before we came on. Like Artie Johnson.
Yeah, I know.
It's so priceless.
And I didn't know that he was doing the voice. And later they threw in the little things like the very interesting and all those little Artie Johnson riffs that they threw in when they cast him.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Brilliant.
I was wondering if that very interesting line was put in by you. If like, Artie Johnson's doing this, so you put that in, but obviously you just answered that question.
I didn't know. I had no clue who was doing the voices. It's only, after the fact, I'd look up these episodes and go, oh, that's who that was. Oh, that's who that was. Oh, that's Dr. Cox from Scrubs. I didn't know he was, all these great things.
Yeah, for sure.
The voice cast, I know, I had the pleasure of having Ed Asner on my radio show right before his 90th birthday. And I'd asked him about Granny, and he said, because he worked with Andrea on Batman, the animated series, obviously. He did voices. He was Rupert Thorne on that one. And he said, if anyone had come to me with that role other than Andrea Romano, I probably would have laughed and turned it down, but I trusted her, and that's why he went with it and did Granny.
And did it so brilliantly.
Yes.
I mean, it's just brilliant. Fantastic.
And I had, Wonder Woman had some a lot of exchanges with Granny and has a history with Granny. And I just remember seeing him. And, I grew up with Mary Tyler Moore. I grew up with Rhoda. Those were like two of my favorite shows of all time. And working with Ed, if I may. And I worked with Ed. No, I mean, it was one of those, one of many pinch me moments in that recording studio because he was there. You know, it wasn't.
Oh, he
like
was. That's so
he
fantastic.
was
Yeah.
there about that whole experience. That you are sitting across from Ephraim Zimbalist, and you are sitting next to Ed Asner and Alfred Molina, and all these
Wow.
people. I mean, it was extraordinary. Now, I'm not in this episode, or the
Not
last
in my
episode.
fault. I'm just following the outline, Susan.
Oh my God. I realized I said to James, like, so how many episodes are we not going to be in? This is so weird. And this was like Michael Flash's first speaking part in Unlimited, I read. And I'm so thrilled he was in there. You know, watching this episode, it reminded me of daytime television, of my beloved soaps, because when they bring on new characters in soap operas, the biggest mistake they can make is to not engage them with the people that we know from the show, the legacy characters. And so if you put them in on an island by themselves without anybody from the original cast, no one cares. So I thought it was great that Flash was connected to the storyline and you have some Jean in there. But it's really stunning because we just had the Cat and Canary episode. And again, no one from the original cast. And it's really something else.
Was that
If I may.
frustrating for you, if I may turn it around?
You know what? At the time, I think we were all aware that we would be working less. But now that I'm seeing it back to back, like, oh wow, we weren't in that episode either. You know, it's a little tough, but at the same time, I mean, I think this is what kept Bruce engaged and so many people engaged with the show, and the fans refer to JLU as, you know, just the best animated series of all time. I think some fans even prefer it to Justice League.
Well, because they had the whole DC universe to play
Exactly.
with. You know, even for
Right.
me as a writer, it was like every episode was completely different. And I get to write the Demon. I get to write Captain Marvel. I get to write so many different characters.
Exactly.
You know, between my comic book work and this show, I think I've written just about every character in the DC universe, and a lot of them were on this show.
Well, and the fans, I think, felt the same way about seeing all these characters and being able to experience them. I mean, so for the fans, I'm thrilled that they got to see all this. And for Bruce and the people behind the scenes, for the actors, not so much.
Right.
Because, you know, it was less work and we have no control over any of this. And, you know, so it's two-sided. You know, I'm thrilled for the fans that they got to do, and for you being a fan, and for little James watching at home, right, James? Right?
Well,
You were
I
watching
couldn't watch
home?
at home, Susan. I didn't have cable, so I couldn't
know.
watch at home.
I know. We'll
talk
talk
about that
about it
later.
on the outro. We'll talk about it on the outro.
But I
Save
know,
it for the outro, Jim.
I know, James DeMatteis, speaking of your run on Justice League that you did with Keith Giffen, which remains to this day, bar none, my very favorite incarnation of the Justice League, as I know I've expressed to you before.
Thank you.
Mr. Miracle was part of that original group, obviously Martian
Yes.
Manhunter, and that line that Jean gives at the very end when he says, we're going to do Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and John says, I wanted the green one. That was very
Right.
much a "Where are my Oreos" Jean line that you'd find between you and Keith in a page of Justice League. Was that?
Oh,
what
and
you
that
added?
the whole opening where they're playing with the Rock'em Sock'em Robots, that could have been Beetle and Booster doing that. It was
Yes.
exactly the tone of our comic. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
I love that. I love
For me to slip into that because that's what I'd been doing for years, you know. But the great thing about this show, and I'm sure I've said this before, is you get that. You get the funny moments. You get the original character, the flashbacks with Mr. Miracle to when he was a kid on
Wow.
Apocalypse.
Yep.
Now, I don't know, Susan, if you know the whole backstory, where there's Darkseid who rules Apocalypse, there's Highfather who rules New Genesis, and they swapped their sons in a peace pact, you know, years before. So Mr. Miracle is actually the son of Highfather, and Orion, who lives on New Genesis, is the son of Darkseid, but they don't know it growing up.
Well, you know what? This is a soap opera, you guys.
Oh, it is, of
Seriously,
course.
It totally
yeah,
is.
Absolutely. But you know, then you flash back to that stuff, which is deeply serious and very moving, you know,
Yes.
and you have all this big action, And what I love as a Kirby fan is it looks like Kirby. I mean, the Kirby machines, you can't mistake his machinery for anybody else's. He would create the wildest stuff. This is a Jewish kid from the Lower East Side, where this stuff came from in his mind and imagination, I don't know. It must have been channeled from another dimension, but it's just extraordinary. And what I love about the show is that, these guys knew the comics, they love and respect the comics. You can tell when people don't love and respect the source material.
Wow,
and they loved and respected the source material. So you're getting as pure a Jack Kirby vision in this episode as you're going to find anywhere. It was fantastic.
So we always ask people, when you revisited this episode, how long had it been since you'd seen this episode?
A few years ago, I think I was looking for stuff to watch on the treadmill, and I might have rewatched a bunch of episodes, but I kind of forgotten it. So I watched it yesterday because the last time I made the mistake of not rewatching the episode and got caught short a few times. So I watched the whole thing yesterday. I loved it. Removing myself from the equation just as a piece of animated entertainment. I thought it was great. I really loved it.
And James, what do you think as that fanboy who watched all those years ago? What's your takeaway from this episode?
It's always interesting because even though some of these episodes, even though I've seen some of these episodes 20 and 30 times, some of them I haven't seen as often. And this was one of those ones I don't think I'd seen quite as often because there were little bits that I forgot. And then you look at it in a different light. If we're going to have Lolita McManus and Christopher Carter and Michael McHuston, I'm paying more attention to the music. This one I was specifically paying more attention to the dialogue and the plot and everything because we knew we were going to have JM on today. But it's a lovely episode, and it's very much Flash was the perfect person to put on this because it was a heavy story and you needed that levity coming from Flash.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was much needed. I loved the dialogue. I loved as only Dick Miller could deliver to Granny. Blow it out your shorts, you goose-stepping harpy.
And that's a very Kirby line. That's exactly something Kirby would have had a character say.
That's one of my favorite stories about Jack Kirby is him when he was working at, I think he was working at Marvel, and evidently there were some not kind people, I'll put it like that, in the lobby. They were kind of like, hey, we know that so-and-so's up there. And people are like, oh, Jack, there's some people, then don't go down there. And Jack stands up, rolls up his sleeves and said, I'll be back in 20 minutes. And he went down to confront him. And of course, they all had skedaddled by then. But I love, that's just the kind of person he was. And it's reflected very much in a lot of his writing and his art, I should say.
Right. And to give that context, this is when Captain America had first come out, this story. And as we know, the first cover of the first issue is before World War II started, is Captain America punching out Hitler. So these were neo-Nazis that called him up, anti-Semitic animals that called up the office. And rather than cower, that's exactly right. He said, all right, I'm going downstairs. I'm going to beat the hell out of these guys,
And he wasn't a big man.
No, he was a little guy. But a little guy who grew up, in gangs on the Lower East Side, and found his way out with a pencil, which is amazing. And let me add one more thing about Kirby. I'd rather talk about Kirby than me anyway. These Marvel movies went on to become the biggest phenomena in the world, and it's influenced so much else. And again, without Kirby, those movies wouldn't exist. So his impact on popular culture, even though most people, they know Stan Lee and they don't know Jack Kirby, which is a shame. His impact on popular culture is incalculable, what this man has done and what he's left us with.
Undoubtedly.
Do you think that's just a generational thing that people, that Stan lived to be very old and people knew him, they met him at all the Comic-Cons, and he's just in the forefront of people's brains as opposed
and he also promoted himself very well.
Yes, he did.
To the detriment sometimes of his collaborators. I'll put that nicely. I have great love and respect for Stan, but he was a credit hog. There's no way around it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, and some people would even say that Stan a lot of times was the showman. Like you kind of said, he decorates the house, he puts the flowers out front.
Yeah.
And it's that the Marvel method they always talk about, the creation of. Sometimes Stan would say, I kind of want an episode where the Fantastic Four meet a guy named Black Panther, and Kirby would draw everything, and Stan would go back and fill in the dialogue. And
right. He'd say, let's bring back Dr. Doom, and he'd go plot and draw a four-issue epic. Yeah. And then Stan would dialogue it. Now, as I know from my own experience, you can do a lot through the dialogue. You can paint that house and put in all kinds of cool furniture. But again, Kirby was the engine, and then Stan did all this other stuff. And I have to say, to give Stan credit, since I just called him a credit hog, he knew how to promote this stuff. Mm-hmm. I think if Stan had not been there and Jack had done it all by himself, the Marvel stuff would have been great comics, but I don't think it would have been as successful because he created this connection to the fans, and he created this myth of what Marvel Comics was, and his dialogue, and even his footnotes and his Stam's soapboxes, and all these things were very, very. I was a 12-year-old kid reading this stuff, very inviting. It made you, as everyone has said, it made you feel like you're part of a special club. So and Stan did things with dialogue that no one was doing in comics at the time. So I don't want to take away from him, but the foundation was Kirby, and then over in this other corner was Ditko doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
So can I ask a rookie question?
Yeah.
So if you have Stan and Jack on one side at Marvel, who are those titans over at DC?
Well, you had Julia Schwartz, who was an editor there, who really kind of kickstarted the second age of superheroes, and guys like Gardner Fox and artists like Gil Kane and Carmine Infantino, all of whom did great work, but they did not. And if they hadn't kickstarted the superhero boom again in the early '60s, then Stan and Jack wouldn't have had the go-ahead to go and do what they did at Marvel. It was because DC was making some money that the publisher said, we need to do this too. But they also far outpaced them once they got going. If you look at what Marvel Comics was by like 1966, when Kirby was in his full-blown cosmic / psychedelic phase, and Ditko was doing Doctor Strange with stuff like you'd never seen before in comics. There was nothing like it before or since, really, because people have been building on that since then. It's sort of like the Beatles with rock and roll. People are still building on what was done in the 60s. They were the groundbreakers, and what Kirby and Ditko and Stan did in the 60s, they were like the Beatles of comics.
I like how let me just say it's 1:30 on the East Coast. Took 30 minutes for JM to bring up the Beatles. That's pretty good. You haven't brought up Star Trek yet, James?
Not
or
yet.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I, however, brought up daytime television, Rhoda, and Mary Tyler Moore. So I am ahead. You know what? As I'm listening to you, JM, I think what an amazing teacher you are. And, to have, like, I can just imagine a student in a classroom walking in that first day of class and having you at the head of the class teaching. What a treat that would be for a kid or an adult even to hear you talk about all this. It's just really, it's wonderful. And as somebody who's, just learning about this universe and all of it and its wonderful, iterations, you just bring so much to this. You really, really do.
I've done some workshops over the years, and they're really, really fun because I'd had what I learned that I had to do. You probably feel it the same way acting. I do what I do in the rules in the very beginning, but then you move forward. And for me, at least, I'm a very intuitive writer. I'm not thinking that much about what I'm doing and the craft of it and how do I do this and how do I do that. But so I've done these workshops. I also work one-on-one with writers. I have a little side gig where I do that. You have to think about these things that you've done intuitively. So I inevitably, when I'm working with one of my clients, I'm learning the whole time because I'm expressing things that I never had to think about before. And I go, oh, that's why I do that. And that's what this is. And it's really fascinating to me because I get to continue to learn about my craft by analyzing what I've been doing intuitively for 40 years. It's an
100%.
Amazing thing.
Yep, 100%.
We should take this time to mention the voice cast, by the way. So we get the voice cast listed because we've already mentioned a few of them, but I'll go through the whole cast. As obviously Carl Lumley for John Jones, Martian Manhunter, Michael Rosenbaum as the Flash. As Susan has pointed out, those are our only two of the big seven main members. We have Ian Graffold as Mr. Miracle, Farrah 4K as Barda. We have Dick Miller as Oberon, Ed Asner as Granny Goodness, Michael Dorn as Calabac, Artie Johnson as Vermin Wunderbar, Jeremy Piven as the Elongated Man, and Zach Shada as Young Scott Free.
Now, Dick Miller, that name is so familiar to me. Is he from like Corman movies or something?
No, he's always been in Joe Dante movies. Any movie ever made by Joe Dante. Oh, is that what it is?
Okay.
So he was the next door neighbor in Gremlins, for example. And he was in The Burbs with Tom Hanks. So if you see a Joe Dante movie, 90% of the time, maybe even higher than that, Dick Miller's in them.
He did a great job. He was a great Oberon. He was a perfect Oberon. Yeah.
And did we mention that this episode was directed by our co-host, Dan Reba?
Our dear friend Dan Reba. That's right. Yeah. And I love the fact because I looked, I'm like, okay, so the last one was directed by Joaquin, so that means this one will be a Dan episode because they just, at this point, they were trading back and forth directing jobs.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm curious with the dialogue and everything, were there specific beats in this one that you recognized as, oh yeah, that's definitely my line? Or like you mentioned, the Vermin Thunderbar, very interesting, was something they probably put in after they got everything back from you. Do you remember specific lines where like, yep, that was mine?
It's really hard after all this time, but everyone's, it's like, it becomes like a mind meld. I blend, they present me with their thing and I shove it into the back of my head, and then it comes out the front, filtered through my consciousness. So it's hard to separate it. But every once in a while, they'll be like, "Oh, that's definitely me," because I know that. I know the style of it. When Mr. Miracle starts talking about hope, I know that's me for sure, without any question. And a certain spin on a joke or something. But after all these years, it's hard. I'd have to like really look at the outline, look at my script, and then watch the episode at the same time and compare them to see what's what and what came from who. And I don't want to. I like the idea that it's in my... One of the joys for me of working on these animated shows and movies that I've worked on is I'm here in my office by myself most of the time. It's me, aside from my collaborations with Giffen, it's 90% of the time, it's just me working on this stuff. So I've said, so many times before, to get on the phone with Stan, with Dwayne, with James Tucker, with all these wonderful people that I've worked with over the years, mostly at Warner Brothers Animation, it's a joy for me, to sit with, because these guys aren't just producers, they're writers, and they're really good at what they do. So to get on the phone and talk for an hour and discuss story and bounce things back and forth as we often do, Justice League was different because each time there I was really presented with an outline, and here's the outline, go write the episode. But most of these shows, you get on the phone and you're talking these things through, and the animated movie is the same thing. So I remember when I was working on Superman Red Sun with Bruce Timm, and oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on someone who I know well, who was the producer, and I'm sorry, I apologize to him right now because it's not like someone I know casually. It's someone I really know, and his name is not in my head. But we'd get on the phone for like 90 minutes to dissect. We were adapting this very complex story, so you get on the phone for 90 minutes at a shot, peeling this story apart. Jim Krieg, thank you, it came to me finally. Sorry, Jim, I apologize. It's a joy for me to work with these guys because they know what they know. They know story. I know story. We get together, and it's just fun for me.
We have a couple questions that came in from Twitter as well. One of them is from @SuperThor94. Wanted to know, and we kind of touched on this a little bit. Did you decide to have Flash be the specific League member for this one, or was there a mandate for the season on who is in what episode? And Susan, this person also points out the one downside of JLU is that the original 7 only had like 1 or 3 members per episode. But do you remember when you were handed the outline, was Flash already the guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the characters are all set. The characters are all set there, so that's not my decision.
And let's see, we got from Anthony3270 wants to know, you might not know this one, JM, was there any pushback from the network on Barda's original outfit? Because she had that, we see her in Batman Beyond. We see her, that's the first time we see Barda in the DC animated universe, and she's wearing that outfit. But then when she gets up to Apocalypse, she switches into her more familiar comic book accurate battle togs. So do you remember hearing about anything? Was there pushback from her for that?
No, I didn't hear anything about that. And it's all these, again, there's Kirby again, these wild designs, that could only come out of his head. Susan, he would create these helmets that were like, like an Inca headdress on acid, these amazing things that he would come up with that no one could ever possibly wear in real life, but they looked just amazing. That was one of the disappointments of the Eternals movie, They did not lean into the Kirby of it all, They
that seems like a huge mistake. Knowing as little as I know, it seems like the number one, imperative should be take as much as you can from Kirby and now go.
Yeah, exactly. They should have completely leaned into that, and they didn't. Yeah, someone hopefully someday will make a New Gods movie or an animated movie or something to really tell that story, because it's an extraordinary story. And Kirby, Kirby didn't have a collaborator. There was no Stan Lee. He wrote it himself. I think it's the best writing of his career, the best art of his career, and the most amazing. It was like, I'm going to do a Beatles analogy again, okay?
And you did a Star Trek analogy before with the mind meld.
Oh, that's right. I didn't even realize that. So, when the Beatles break up, and John Lennon's incredibly frustrated. He's going through all this stuff. The last few years of the Beatles are very frustrating for him. And then he just explodes with this album, John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, which only he could have possibly created. For my money, one of the greatest albums in the history of rock and roll. And it was the frustration. It was all that bottled up frustration and pain and anger that allowed him to explode creatively like that. And it was the same thing with Kirby. He was sitting on so much resentment and anger for years. In the last few years at Marvel, he basically decided he wasn't going to create anything new. And if you look at like the last year or so of Fantastic Four, there's not a lot happening there, because he's saving all these ideas and he's saving them. And finally he gets to DC and the top of his head just explodes with all these extraordinary characters and concepts. And it was just amazing. I return to these books every few years and I'll reread them, and they actually get better with time. And that to me is the work of a great artist,
Yes. And can we talk? Do you have any thoughts about Big Barda? I mean, I've encountered her a few times myself in episodes. James, like as a fan, did she have any? Because I think that this was her last appearance in the DCAU. Is that, or am I making that up?
No, I don't recall her showing up again in this particular series. Same for Mr. Miracle, which I thought was odd, because Mr. Miracle, one of my very favorites characters, especially of the Kirbyverse, and I was surprised they didn't bring him back in somehow, and her as well. But you were asking my thoughts on her, I guess. Just in terms. I always liked the character because she's someone who's tough. She holds her own, and it's one of those marriages where it's not your stereotypical marriage. They're foreign entities. They're not they're not.
No.
So and it's not someone, he's not going to talk back to her because she can pick him up and smash him if she wanted. But it's such a cool character, unique design. It wasn't. And JM, you can correct me on this. I don't feel like Barda was really derivative of any other character, female or otherwise, that had come before.
No, and think about when she first appeared, it was like 1970. And to have this powerful female character who was tougher than the guy, I mean, who could take on anyone, was pretty revolutionary. You look at the Fantastic Four, from the 60s, and Sue is always like, oh, Reed, like he was like Laura Petrie. Oh, Reed, what are we going to do now? And he'll tell her what to do, and it wasn't until the 70s that they started beefing her up. But Big Barda comes along, and it's really quite a revolutionary character. I wrote for a short time, there was a Mr. Miracle solo series in the 80s that I did, which is about them moving to the suburbs, trying to live a quiet life in the suburbs. But the dynamic between them was just fantastic because, he knew who the stronger one was, and he knew in the end really who even the smarter one was in this duo, but they loved each other, and the dynamic between the two of them was great. And that was the only soft spot in her, was him.
And you feel it. You feel it. You really do. And she relishes a good fight, just like, she reminded me a little of Hawkgirl in that way. That Hawkgirl, because she was raised that way, and Hawkgirl just like, she gets so excited when she can kick ass.
Right. There's a scene in this episode where I guess it's Calabac and Barda are beating the hell out of these, whether it was parademons or whatever. And Flash says, should we get involved with it? And Miss Miracle's like, no, let them have their fun.
Yeah, this is fun. Some women like to shop. This is what she loves to do.
Right, exactly.
I was a little confused when Jean morphs in at the end. I was a little confused. I'm like, why? How did that happen? Like, how is he there now? And
honestly, watching it, I had the same reaction, but they actually explained it at the end. They said that they boom tubed back, left Calabac there, took John
I didn't get
through.
That went over my head.
It's kind of in the moment it confuses you, and then I'm glad whoever did it explained it at the end. I'm so removed from this that it's like they did this. I had nothing to do with it, But it was a nice twist too. It was a nice twist there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had to look up the characters. I didn't understand why Granny was there, and like what was the connection to Wunderbar,
Wunderbar.
oh, Wunderbar, and like what was their fight about? And I didn't understand the back history at all.
Right,
So I had
right.
to
Yeah,
look
it's like jumping in the middle of a comic book.
It really, it really
I think if you
is.
watch the episode another time, they do kind of explain everything, but there's a lot of action and a lot of movement going on. So you really have to be paying attention. And they're throwing there they are again with we're throwing a lot at you in the course of, whatever it is, 22 minutes.
Yes.
So you got to really be paying attention to get all the little bits and pieces, because there's a lot of characters in this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot, and they each have so much history. They each bring so much to the to the story. So you're just like, okay, how do they know each other? What? But I did sense the love between Barda and her. I really, that was done so well. It just really felt it between the two of them.
They're doing a
lovely.
Mr. Miracle animated series now. James Gunn is doing. I think will be out. I think this year. So we'll see how.
Yeah,
Okay,
based on
stay
how
tuned for
Creature
that, kids.
Commandos went, Creature Commandos was really good. So I'm assuming that this one will be just as good. I hope.
And he's a fan of all. I mean, he grew up with all of this.
Yeah.
He's so respectful of the history, and so yeah.
I hope he survives what's coming.
I know. Oof. I hope we all. I mean, oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
We had another question from a Twitter user. I'm going to go back to that for just a moment. We had at Lavinia_LL just rewatched it really fast and was wondering who decided which heroes were part of it and which were not, which we decided in the last one was, also, was there some character you really wanted to put in one of your episodes and it couldn't happen for any reason?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that, because I know there were several times I pitched them on stories I wanted to do with characters I wanted and never got one through ever. And I'm sure I still have the notes somewhere, because I have a file of all my old JLU stuff. That's why I was able to go back and I looked through the script, I looked through the outline. I wanted to be prepared this time,
It's funny because Bob Goodman had notes also, and it was really useful in the conversation because he was like, "Well, I remember."
Yeah.
But also, that's a tough room to pitch to. Like, hey, can we do this idea? That's a tough room to get to get the green light.
Also, they have their whole season planned out.
Of course.
Arced out. They know the beats they want to hit. They know the storylines they want to move forward. So to kind of get in the cracks of that was really difficult.
100%.
But it was fine. It didn't matter. I had a great time. And then they hand you the Kirbyverse. So there's no complaints to be had,
Not that you're a complainer anyway.
One of the little things
I
I noticed
save my complaints about my career for my wife. She'll get the complaints, and then I get them out, and then you move on. You learn, as you know, as an actor, Susan, you learn early on, the complaining doesn't help. It really doesn't. You need to express it, get it out of the way, and move on. Because being a freelancer, and I remember when you did that interview with my daughter for her podcast that she had, whatever, a year or two ago, and I was listening to that, and half the things you said, I could have said. Because whether you're a writer or an actor or a musician, the freelance life is the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's filled with rejection. It's filled with people making decisions about your work that you have no control of. And you can either have a fit every time something doesn't go your way, or you take a deep breath and you move on. And as a writer, moving on means write the next story,
Right. It's a little more difficult as an actor because, you're so dependent.
Right. You're not creating the material.
No, you're not. And also, some of the losses are harder to get past, and I'm sure as a writer too, there are losses.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things in my career that to this day, even though it might be 15 years ago or 20 years ago, if I think about it, my heart breaks a little,
Same. Yeah, absolutely. But it's a will ask, well, did you want to do that? And you said no. And why weren't you in that?
Right.
show?
As if you have control. Hey, why don't you just go to Marvel and tell them to do this series? It does, once in a while, maybe, but most of the time it doesn't work that way,
Yeah. 100%.
We don't have that control. If you want that control, you have to go off and create your own thing, from the ground up. Which is why I'll now plug my new book, Dark Future, out now.
Oh, this is perfect timing. Perfect timing, because we're good. We're ready. Unless you have other things you'd like to add.
No, about that episode, no, I'm all good.
You're all good? Okay, so then perfect timing. Is there anything else you'd like to promote while we have you here?
How interesting that you brought that up, Susan. Dark Future just came out in January. It's a new novel. I've been working with this company, Neotex, for the past 3 or 4 years. I did 2 novellas for them, and this one crept over the line from novella to novel.
Wow.
And I think with absolute lack of objectivity, I think it's one of the best things I've ever written. I'm really proud of it. My daughter read it and said, "This is the most you of anything you've ever written," which I think is, depending on how you feel about me, it's either a great thing or a disaster,
Oh, that's
I'm very, very proud of it. You can hop over to Amazon and pick that up. It's a sort of a metaphysical time travel story. And I'll just give the one part away. It starts in the early 60s, in the Kennedy era, and the dark future that our main character, who was sort of a Rod Serling-esque writer, travels to is our present day. It started years ago. I used to have conversations with my son. I said, if we took a half step back and looked at the world we're living in, it's science fiction. It's like a Philip K. Dick novel. This world is insane. The technology, the politics, the global warming, all these things. And now it's even more so. Now it's like, if you wrote what's happening in our world now in a book and gave it to yourself even 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you'd go, no, that's ridiculous. That's far-fetched,
No, it's bizarro. It's bizarro.
Yeah. And I got to indulge my love of all different things from, my love of old radio and early 60s television and time travel stories, all the way to the other end to get into the metaphysics and ideas about God and all these things. So it's a story that every once in a while you get a story as a writer where in that moment in time you get to pour everything that you are in that moment and everything you think and feel about life and the universe into that story. And this became one of those stories for me. So I'm really proud of it.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's quite an achievement.
Thank you.
Well, we have that out there, and thank you. We just can't thank you enough for doing this with us, because it's such a pleasure for us to hear your insights and hear you talk about Mr. Kirby. And, you're just one of the good guys, and we so appreciate you being with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun, and it's fun to reacquaint myself with this stuff because you said whatever 20 how many years ago 20 something years
21,
ago. It's like it's a long time.
Years,
yeah. So to go back and look at this stuff and reread the outlines and reread the scripts and start to think about it is it's a little time travel journey of my own, So it's nice. It's nice.
And I love that you have the notes, the original notes.
Yeah, I saved all that stuff, everything from that show I have. Yeah.
Before we let you go, also, I know you're back in the concert. You're going to be doing a couple Galaxy Cons upcoming, I think. Do you have those dates for people? Next
week, I'll be at GalaxyCon Richmond. That's a 4-day one. And then in July, I'm doing GalaxyCon New Orleans and GalaxyCon Raleigh. Then in September, what am I doing in September? FanX Salt Lake and DragonCon.
DragonCon's great. That's a big one.
Yeah, I stayed away once COVID hit. I stayed away from conventions for a long time, and then last year I did both. I did San Diego, and my wife and I went to Brazil for CCXP, which is like the biggest convention on the planet. I think more than 300,000 people rolled through that convention, and I said, "Well, I can get through those now, so I guess I'm back on the convention circuit."
Yeah,
again.
Wow, you dove right into the deep end. With
yeah,
those
exactly, and I had a great time.
Now, so if people want to follow you and, for those who didn't jot down those dates that you're going to be where, is there a way to know what social media and everything like that people can find out where you're going to be?
You can go to my website, jmdmatteis.com. Of all the social media sites, I'm on Blue Sky the most.
Okay.
With I dip into Threads now and again, and dip into Facebook and dip into Instagram. But you'll see more of me on Blue Sky. But if you hit any of those things, it should lead you back to the information.
Okay. All right, great. Because I know the fans will want to keep up with you.
Yeah, lots of stuff to be signed. Lots of comic books and posters that I've got your signatures on. So fans, get out there and see JM whenever you get the chance. It's always great to have you on.
It's a pleasure. It's really, really a pleasure. And Susan, I have one question for Susan before we go.
Oh, yeah.
So, Susan, you have one of the greatest laughs in the world. I love your laugh. Did you ever get a gig based on the show?
Never.
No?
And I didn't get to laugh much as Wonder Woman.
No, I'm sure you didn't.
And or any of the jobs I've done, really. I mean, when I think about in the video, all the video game roles, not a lot of laughter.
That's interesting.
A lot of dying and death scenes, and ferociousness and fighting, but not a lot of laughter. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I try to move away from the mic when I laugh because I know it's very. I've heard our episodes. I listen, and I'm like, wow, that laugh is big, and I try to not go too much into the mic.
But there's so much joy in it. It's a great laugh. So someone now needs to hire you specifically for your laugh, I think.
Oh, God bless you.
All right, guys. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Take care.
Take care.
Until the next time.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye. There he goes, back on the show again. Always glad to have him. And like you said, it's great to have the writers. It's really great to have the writers.
It is. And, the only thing better than having the freelancer is to have the person who, was on staff. Because as he said, he just gets the outline and then he goes. And you just love hearing from the person that was in on it from the very beginning to the very end. And we're so lucky that we have people like Stan joining us, to give us the full picture.
Yeah.
And they're also generous with each other. One of them is saying how great the outline is. The other one's saying how great the final script is. So yeah, is there anyone lovelier than this guy, than JM?
No, he's great. And I know he wants to come back on for Clash because when we first had him on, that was one of the ones he pointed out. I said, I got to write Captain Marvel the way I wanted to write him. So for those of you confused, he's now called Shazam, but as I always say, the wizard Shazam, he's Captain Marvel. So copyright infringement not implied or necessary, but yeah. DC is Captain Marvel.
So and I can't wait because I just enjoy his commentary and, I loved hearing the stories about Jack. As somebody who didn't grow up in this world, it's just revelatory to hear all this stuff. I love it.
Yeah, he painted a perfect picture of Jack Kirby because he is foundational to. I always think of him. I know he did all this stuff with DC, but that came later in his career. So I always think of him as a Marvel guy. And some of my favorite Marvel Comics covers drawn by Jack Kirby, like Tales of Suspense. I think it's 48. No, Tales of Suspense 49, where it's got the Angel from the X-Men punching out Iron Man high in the air. Or the Fantastic Four cover that has the X-Men and the Fantastic Four squaring off against each other. It's just incredible artwork, and the Silver Age for Marvel would not have been as strong as it was had it not been for Jack Kirby.
So do you have a collection? Do you have some of these in your collection?
I've gone back because I had to sell my entire collection in 2021. But I've gone back and it's so funny. One of the runs I refused to sell was the 125 issue run of Justice League that J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen worked on, along with Kevin Maguire and Terry Austin, because I was reading those when I was in junior high, when I was a freshman in high school. I was reading those comics and I loved the banter, the way they wrote the characters, and it was not what you expected from the Justice League because it was a lot of humor in the book. But I also went back and I've got his run on Mr. Miracle, the one that he mentioned he wrote, that he did that standalone episodes.
Yes.
I still have that in my collection. And I've gone back and picked up.
So can you imagine telling that teenage boy that you were one day going to meet these people and have conversations with them about their work?
It blows my mind every time that I get to do what I do.
And he signed things for you, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I've got a frame because you've seen, I think, some of my posters that I have that I've custom framed and mounted. And what I'll do is, as soon as I get enough signatures on them, I'll have them framed and mounted. In my hallway right now, I've got a Justice League poster that I've got signed by JM, by Keith Giffen before he passed, by Kevin Nolan. The only one I'm missing is Terry Austin, the inker. It's just because he doesn't do many conventions. But I've got that poster proudly hanging on the wall. I get to look by it every time I walk through the hall.
Wow. Well, this was such a treat all around. I know we had a few mic issues, so
Barry,
we're working on that. And but this episode, what a joy!
Yeah.
What a joy he is. Well, before we wrap it up, we want to ask people to subscribe to the podcast, to please leave a review. We love hearing from you, and to check out our Patreon. We're working on our Patreon. We may be adding a couple of things there. And, so please do all that because it really does make a difference. And James, do you want to tell the kids what you have going on and how they can find you?
Yes. If you look on any crime registry database, I'm usually there for burglary and no. I have a very clean criminal record. You can find me on all the social medias. So Twitter, Threads, Instagram, at Geek To Me Radio. It's also facebook.com/Geek To Me Radio. If you head over to youtube.com/Geek To Me Radio, we do the live radio show on a terrestrial AM radio station called KTRS here in St. Louis, but it also streams online. So when Joey V is in the studio, we have video on YouTube and Facebook as well. So go to youtube.com and please subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way, every Sunday when we go live, you'll be able to tune in and catch the show. Joey's not with me this coming Sundays, but we do have Carl Lumley on the air. The following Sunday after that, we've got the great Teo Penglis, who played Tony DeMera on Days of Our Lives.
Yeah.
And we've got a pre-recorded interview with Billy Ray, who's a screenwriter. That he did Captain Phillips. He wrote that one with Tom Hanks and a bunch of other ones we get to talk about. He's got a new book out. And then the final Sunday of March, we'll have Andrea Romano joining us as well to talk about her upcoming appearance at Two Rivers Comic Con.
And you should mention that's your Comic Con. And Andrea's going to be one of the guests.
Yes.
You want to mention who else is going to be coming to the Comic-Con?
Yeah, we've got a really fantastic lineup. So Andrea Romano, we've also got Kimberly Brooks, who's an outstanding voice actor, does a lot of animation, anime, and then she was also the voice of Allura in the new Voltron DreamWorks Netflix version, which is how Andrea knows her. We're going to have Keone Young, the voice of Storm Shadow, and several other voice casts. He's worked on Avatar, and he's also a lot of live action acting as well. So he's got fantastic stories. Keone, you could just sit him down and gather around for 6 hours and listen to him tell these amazing stories. Comic book writers and artists, obviously. So we've got Larry Hama, the godfather of G.I. Joe, Bob Budiansky, his Transformers counterpart, because he created Transformers just like Larry did with G.I. Joe. Dan Reba is joining us again, and we've got Kevin Altieri coming this time as well. We've got Pat Broderick, fantastic artist, 3-time Eisner Award winner Rick Burchett, who did our poster art for us, is a St. Louis native, Andy Parks, and we're going to try to add a few more onto there if we can, but that's our lineup, and we got a really great lineup.
That's loaded. That's fantastic. And so for people who want to get tickets, best way to do that?
The number 2, riverscomiccon.com, and I'll announce it now because I think by the time this drops, this will be active. If you are a fan of DC Comics and Harley Quinn might be your favorite character, we're giving away a near mint condition first appearance of Harley Quinn, Batman Adventures number 12 from the personal collection of artist Rick Burchett. All you have to do to be entered into the drawing is buy a ticket to Two Rivers Comic Con. So you buy a Saturday pass, you get an entry into the drawing. If you buy a weekend pass, that's 2 entries in. If you've already bought your ticket, you're entered. So there's no need to worry about that at all. And we're going to be doing that drawing, I think, towards the end of March, first part of April. So you can have, this is a Grail level comic. I was just watching one on eBay in very fine condition, sold for $600. So
wowza.
You can grab this comic book as we'll give it to you at the con when you arrive, and you can take it over and have Rick sign it, since he was one of the people who worked on that book, and this is from his personal collection. So buy your ticket to Two Rivers Comic Con to get entered into that drawing, as well as some other drawings we're going to have going on.
I can't believe you have a Comic-Con.
It's weird.
It's crazy fantastic. I mean, you said, hey, we don't have a Comic-Con here in St. Louis, my beloved town. And so what did you do? I went out and wrangled a bunch of people and said, hey, you got to come to this, please, 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 please. So you were there last year, along with Maria and Phil and Carl and Mark Bagley, Roy Thomas, David Michelini, Chuck Patton, Keith Williams, and a lot of great people. So thank you. Couldn't have enjoyed it more. So just go get your tickets, kids.
Thanks. What about you?
Well,
you got stuff going on.
I do, but you know what? By the time this is going to air, I'll have already been to Sacramento, Sac Anime, and back, I think. So I'll let you know how it went next time. But do go to my website because you can find out where I'm going to be. I have to add a couple of things on there. I'm running a little behind right now, but it's .com. And then on social media, it's Susan Eisenberg 1, the number 1 on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram and oh my, I think that's it.
So
go check us out and just continue to join us for these episodes. We love doing this podcast, and we so appreciate your support. And thank you for tuning in with us. And please continue to tune in, because the conversation will continue.